The committee will come to order. We will resume questioning the witness under the 5-minute rule. Mr. McClintock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Whitaker, I'm sure you'd agree that the appearance of favoritism or partisanship by law enforcement agencies is absolutely deadly to a nation that's founded upon the principle of equal justice under law. If law enforcement agencies are perceived to be biased or partisan, I think faith in them can, and in our system of justice, can quickly collapse. And I am concerned about many alarming developments in the conduct of the FBI and the Department of Justice that call its impartiality into question. I've been reading Greg Jarrett's book on the Comey investigation into the Clinton emails and the Uranium One deal and the Mueller investigation into the Trump campaign. And in it, Mr. Jarrett meticulously documents case after case of political bias by the FBI, of illegal conduct at the highest levels of the Department of Justice, destruction of evidence, possible obstruction of justice by Mr. Comey himself, perjury by top DOJ officials, prosecutorial misconduct, and political bias throughout Mueller's team. Now, if the Russia investigation was initiated because of a patently false dossier, why aren't we seeing an equally aggressive investigation into these very meticulously documented charges?
Congressman, as you mentioned at the beginning, we do conduct our investigations independent of political interference at the Department of Justice.
That's not what
let me finish.
The preponderance of evidence is telling me from sources such as this one.
Well, and specifically related to the document you just described, that is the subject of an Inspector General's review investigation, together with the U.S. Attorney from the District of Utah that was appointed by General Sessions to look into and review certain matters that this committee had asked be reviewed.
Can we expect a full, complete, and aggressive investigation of charges of wrongdoing by officials in the FBI and the Department of Justice on these matters?
Congressman, I can assure you that any allegation of misconduct by an employee of the Department of Justice will be looked into thoroughly.
Well, I think back to the Lois Lerner scandal, and that never was addressed. Why should I be more confident in your assurances now?
Congressman, I was a private citizen when the Lois Lerner situation occurred. In fact, it occurred mostly under the previous administration. I know that General Sessions did a review of that matter before I was Chief of Staff, so I really don't have any visibility as I sit here today as Acting Attorney General as to what happened in that situation.
Let me talk about the apparent double standard and disproportionate show of force in cases like the arrest of Roger Stone. As I understand it, Stone's attorneys were in constant contact with the Department of Justice. He's 66 years old, doesn't own any firearms, and yet he was the subject of a pre-dawn raid by 29 combat armed officers. As Mr. Jordan has pointed out, CNN was obviously tipped off to have cameras there. And in fact, they arrived to set up before the raid began. They were allowed to stay to film the entire spectacle, despite the fact the public was kept out, ostensibly because the FBI was so concerned of violence by the 66-year-old unarmed man in this pre-dawn raid. And you compare that to cases like Bob Menendez, who was allowed to quietly turn himself in. The obvious explanation is that this was a political act whose purpose was to terrify anyone thinking of working in the Trump campaign in the future. And again, it harkens back to the conduct of the IRS, terrifying rank-and-file Tea Party members with tax audits because of their political views. How do you explain this, and what are you doing about it?
Congressman, this is a very serious situation that you raised, but just know that the FBI makes arrests in a manner most likely to ensure the safety of its agents and of the person being arrested. The FBI must also consider the safety of the surrounding community.
How do you explain the discrepancy between the way Roger Stone was treated and the way Bob Menendez was treated?
Again, the arrest team has to consider numerous factors in making the judgment as to how to conduct the operation.
Do you at least understand the appearance of impropriety that projects to the country and undermines the faith that the American people have in their justice system and in its detachment from politics?
Congressman, I cannot provide the details in this open hearing without revealing what factors the FBI considers in those decisions, and obviously that information could be used to put other FBI agents conducting other operations in harm's way. What I can assure you, Congressman, is that the FBI is prepared to brief this matter on the decisions that were made in that particular arrest in a closed session of this committee.